You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and today, as we do every Thursday, we are diving into those picks for week number 13 in the NFL, beginning, of course, with tonight's Thursday Night Football matchup. I'm coming off a 12-4 weekend, currently sitting at 113-67, so we're looking pretty good right now through the season so far. But make sure you comment down below. Want to hear your picks. I want to hear your thoughts on my picks. I want to hear maybe some of the betting odds you guys go for. I know I don't necessarily do betting myself, but I love hearing what you all are placing those bets on. It's always very interesting for me to follow along with. So diving right in, beginning with that very first game, we are looking at the Thursday night matchup between the Seattle Seahawks and the Dallas Cowboys. This one in home as the Cowboys look to defend their undefeated 5-0 record at home against the Seahawks team that, to be honest, is kind of struggling right now. For all the finger pointing at Dallas and not having beaten a team above 500, they have a really good opportunity to maybe get it done tonight, with the Seahawks being 1-3 in their last 4 games, with only a 3-point victory over the Washington Commanders. That also follows a blowout loss to the Baltimore Ravens about 4 weeks ago. So this is a matchup where at least you get to silence the doubters, I guess you could say, from some of those people against the Cowboys and their lack of wins over teams with a record above 500. You also look at Seattle and a couple of injuries that I think are worth noting here are Leonard Williams, who is listed as questionable right now. Tough loss for the defensive line if he's not going to be playing tonight. And then you have, of course, running back Kenneth Walker, who's been listed as doubtful, and it seems like he's not going to be in this game, at least from what I've been hearing. Could be wrong, could change come game time, but when someone's listed as doubtful this close to the game, usually means it's more or less they're likely not going to play. As far as looking at these two teams and how they kind of match up here, I think one of the biggest and largest differences between them is obviously going to be the scoring differential between the two. When you look at Dallas, they're scoring on 48.7% of their offensive drives to Seattle's only 36.4%. Dallas is one of the best scoring teams in the NFL. And then on the flip side of things, when you look defensively, teams barely 1-4 drives are making their way into scoring position against Dallas, whereas Seattle, they're looking at near 40% at 37. So there is a big discrepancy between the way these two teams have been playing, even though that the Seahawks are only about 2 games back from the Dallas Cowboys. When you look at Seattle, the way they've been playing, especially the last couple of weeks, it's not looking pretty for them. The other thing I'm going to be looking at here in this game that I think is going to be a very interesting watch is going to be if Seattle can protect Geno Smith in this matchup here. Dallas sacks quarterbacks on 10.2% of dropbacks. So 1 in every 10 times the quarterback drops back to take a snap, they're usually getting a sack. And that's good for second most in the NFL right now. Seattle allowing sacks on about 7% of their dropbacks. So this is a tough one for Seattle and a tough sell for me to pick the underdog in Seattle here. So I'm going to go with the Cowboys 28-17. They have just been unbelievable at home, and with the way Seattle has looked the last 4 weeks, I'm not quite sure, especially minus Kenneth Walker, how they get the job done, all things considered. Moving into Sunday's games, though, beginning in the early window here, we'll start with the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Tennessee Titans. The Colts currently 4-1 on the road this season, going up against the Tennessee Titans, who at 4-7 have only won games at home this season and are sitting at a record of 4-1 at home with just one singular loss when they're playing in their stadium. Now, there is a big question mark here as the possibility of Will Levis missing the game with an ankle injury. He is currently listed as questionable, so are we going to see maybe someone like Malik Willis? Does maybe Ryan Tannehill get another shot as the de facto backup to Will Levis now? And then on Indianapolis side, a couple of notable names here, DeForest Buckner and Ryan Kelly, both listed as questionable. And of course, Jonathan Taylor, who's been knocked out for a few weeks now, having to get surgery on, I believe it was his thumb, if I'm not mistaken. So it sounds like he's going to be out for the next couple of weeks. So a tough loss for a team looking to get a big divisional win this week against a Titans team that pretty down and out, I would say, at this point in the season, but mathematically speaking, still in the hunt for maybe like that 7 seed in the playoffs if the remainder of the season breaks their way. They need a lot of help in terms of winning their own games and other teams dropping in the AFC. On top of that, both teams offensively, when you look at them, very big difference in terms of scoring. We have a Colts team that is top 10 in the NFL right now in points per game at 24.5 points per game, as the Tennessee Titans are sitting at a lowly just under 17 points. They're 27th in the NFL right now. So when you look at that matchup there from just a pure scoring matchup, I'm a little bit concerned that Tennessee might not be able to keep up. Now, there are some good things going their favor. Indianapolis, for what it's worth, does let teams move, especially on the ground, and Tennessee loves to run the football with their running backs over there, so there is an exploit for the Titans to kind of go after if things aren't going well through the air, regardless of whoever's throwing the football. On top of that, Tennessee, again, for what it's worth, despite all their struggles that they have had this season, they are one of the best red zone defenses in the NFL right now, allowing touchdowns on only 38.7% of red zone trips, which is good for second best in the NFL. So, despite the fact that the Tennessee Titans, I feel like, look like the far lesser team in this matchup here, being at home, I think there is a good opportunity that there could be a potential upset here if the dominoes fall their way. However, I am going to stick with Indianapolis on this one here. I think that just all things considered, even minus Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss has been excellent in the absence when Taylor was not playing in the early portion of the season. And this Colts offense, I don't know how they get the job done week in and week out and how they look as good as they do. If you had told me at the beginning of this season, before Anthony Richardson even got hurt, that this offense was going to be a top 10 scoring unit, I probably wouldn't have believed you. And then once Anthony Richardson went down, I definitely would not have believed you. But here we are, number 8 in the NFL in scoring. Colts, just for whatever reason, seem to be able to get it done. Excellent offensive scheme and just overall a great effort from the team offensively throughout the entirety of the season. Shane Steichen deserves a lot of credit for that. So I'll take the Colts 22-19. Road Warriors moving to 5-1 on the road. Now, looking at a matchup here that is an interesting one because there's a lot of things that you can consider when you look at this matchup here, with the Los Angeles Chargers being hosted by the New England Patriots. The Patriots currently sitting at 1-5 at home. Obviously, Gillette no longer the home field advantage that it once was in the heyday of the dynasty era. Then you have the Chargers, who themselves 2-3 on the road. They're struggling this season at 4-7. When you look at the way these two teams match up, I will say Chargers look like the better team. However, I think that there is something that's worth noting here, and I know that some people like to say that, especially post-Brady era in New England, it was all Brady, it wasn't necessarily Belichick. Well, Bill Belichick's still an excellent coach. I don't really care what anyone has to say about that, and he does an excellent job out-coaching Brandon Staley, as they have yet to beat Bill Belichick and his Patriots in the Brandon Staley era. 2 losses, one 27-24, and the other one was like a 40-something blowout loss. So, is it a possibility that somehow, some way, this Brandon Staley-led Chargers team that has struggled all year long to live up to the paper champions that they are, yeah, I would say absolutely. More than likely, I could see the Chargers dropping this game. I really could. Despite all the offensive issues that the Patriots have, they are the second worst in scoring. They're averaging a measly 13.5 points a game to the 24.5 that the Chargers are putting up each and every single week. And on top of that, the Patriots, 19 turnovers this season. They're tied for 9th most in the NFL. Chargers don't necessarily turn the ball over too often. They just end up being the victim of really bad and untimely errors altogether. They only sit at 12. And on top of that, the Patriots don't even know who their quarterback is. But somehow, in my gut, I still feel like there's a way that the Chargers could drop this game. I don't think it's a sure thing by any means. There is so many things swinging in the direction of the Chargers, from just the matchup itself to even injury concerns. The Patriots have a very long injury report with guys like Pop Douglas, Trent Brown, David Andrews, Zeke's on there, Dietrich Wise is on there. There are a ton of things swaying in the Chargers' favor. Just do not be surprised if the Chargers get the upset. Now, all that being said, I'm going to take the Chargers. I know I just basically rained poo all over the Chargers' chances in this game, and I'm basically calling that there's probably going to be an upset here. I would not be shocked if I get this one wrong, but the Chargers should be winning this matchup here. Should be. Keyword should. Capital SHOULD. Should be winning this matchup. I have them taking the game 24-16. I'm assuming that the offense is going to continue to just be stuck in park over there in New England, and I think that the Chargers can muster up at least a couple of scores on offense, maybe take advantage of another bad interception from one of the quarterbacks, whoever ends up being in New England, and getting the job done here. But would I be shocked if somehow the Chargers blew this game? Absolutely not. Next game we're looking at, we have Detroit and New Orleans in New Orleans for this game here, as the Lions kind of reeling from their shocking Thanksgiving loss here, going up against a Saints team that defensively has been pretty solid all year long, but the offense has got to be one of the most frustrating ones that I've watched this season when you consider the amount of talent they have on that side of the football here. When you look at some of the injuries that I think are worth mentioning here on both sides of the ball, Alex Anzalone, David Montgomery, and Tracy Walker all currently listed as questionable for the Lions. And New Orleans, they have a pretty hefty list themselves with some pretty notable names. Chris Olave, Cam Jordan, Marcus May. You also got Pete Werner on there as well. There is definitely some concerns injury-wise on both sides. Now, when you look at these two teams, they've both struggled in their own ways, so this makes the matchup a little bit more intriguing for as to how it's actually going to finish. Now, when you look at New Orleans, they have not scored more than 20 points since October. I know it's November 30th, but this game will be played in December. We are going on over a month now since the last time New Orleans put up more than 20 in a game. However, Detroit, with their struggles defensively, have allowed more than 26 or more points in 4 of their last 5 games. If there was ever like a get-right game offensively for the New Orleans Saints, this could potentially be a matchup that they could take advantage of. Not to mention the fact that Detroit's defense altogether has just been a little bit suspect as of late, coupled with some serious turnover issues the last few weeks from Detroit, having 7 total turnovers in the last couple of games they've played. And New Orleans is a team that loves to and knows how to turn the football over with 20 takeaways this season. That's good for 5th most in the NFL. I do think that with New Orleans passing defense being as good as it is, it's one of the best in the NFL, 7th in terms of yards per game allowed. Detroit should definitely lean into their rushing attack and lean into it early and often at that. I know David Montgomery's listed as questionable, but Jahmyr Gibbs has shown he is a very capable running back and he can carry the load as a 3-down guy. So lean into your run game. You have one of the best in the NFL. Don't give more opportunities than necessary for this Saints defense to take the football away from you, because they know they can get the job done if you give them that opportunity to. I am going to take the Lions 24-20. I expect a turnover that makes this game a little bit scary for Detroit, but I do think that they get a bounce back game against New Orleans, who, like I've been mentioning, really struggling on offense. And albeit this is a good opportunity for a bounce back game against Detroit, I do think the Lions are the better team here and should be getting the win. Next, we look at the Falcons and the Jets, and I've got to say, this is probably one of the worst quarterback matchups of the week, because we're going to get Desmond Ridder taking on I believe Tim Boyle, unless something has changed in that front, but I believe it's going to be Tim Boyle. But there is the news now surrounding the team. Aaron Rodgers shooting for Week 16, December 24th, for a return. Now, does that lead to maybe a little more oomph from this Jets team, especially on the offensive side of the ball? I don't necessarily know. There are some concerns with the Jets, especially injury-wise, going into this game here with Breece Hall, Will McDonald, Billy Turner, and Mekhi Becton all listed as questionable. That's a heavy hit to the offense, even if you're missing a couple of those guys there. And Will McDonald, of course, really starting to come on strong here in the back half of the season for the Jets as a contributor there on the defensive line. I don't really know how you look at this game and come away with like a surefire victor. But once you really dive into the weeds, I think it's easy to kind of come to a conclusion. The Jets offense has not put up more than 13 points since Week 6 of the NFL. Atlanta has at least been getting above that 20-point margin. They're sitting at about 23 points at minimum in their last 4. So offensively, despite some of the headaches that I have seen from the Falcons this entire season, I do trust their offense a little bit more. Even with Desmond Ridder under center, who at times feels like he's trying every way possible to lose a game, and the Falcons defense is like trying to prevent them from dropping despite his best efforts. It's kind of a little battle that I feel like I'm watching through the season here. Atlanta also has the 3rd best red zone defense in the NFL right now, allowing touchdowns on only 38.2% of the trips here. And when you look at the New York Jets in terms of scoring touchdowns in the red zone, they're barely doing it 1 in 4 times. They're at 28% right now. So, I mean, offensively, the Jets they're another one of those teams. Like, people use the term stuck in neutral. This is like another, I like to refer to it as stuck in park, because that's about what we're getting from this Jets offense here. I think if Atlanta can just focus on running the football, get Bijan Robinson the ball more, he looked really good last week. He's a playmaker. They need to start feeding him the football more, make things easier for Desmond Ridder, take some of the weight off his shoulders so he doesn't find himself in situations to make mistake. And you have a New York Jets defense that's allowing about 140 yards a game, which is second most in the NFL right now. You can take advantage by just protecting the football, taking it a little bit more out of Desmond Ridder's hands and putting it into a guy like Bijan Robinson, who is very, very talented and clearly needs to be getting the ball more in there in Atlanta, and they should get the job done. I have a very terrible fear in me that the Jets somehow find a way to win this game based off just their defensive play alone. I feel like that secondary and just the pass defense altogether could give some problems to Desmond Ridder, but I am going to go with the Falcons. I have them winning 23-13. This is one of those games I flip-flopped on a lot, though. I'm not 100% sure on. Like I said, I would not be shocked to see the Jets defense just make life hell for Desmond Ridder, and we wind up seeing maybe Taylor Heineke come back in, or for whatever reason, it just winds up being one of those games where Atlanta just can't get anything going because they're good against defending the pass over there in New York. It's that run defense that can be a little bit porous at times, and I think that's what Atlanta needs to lean into. So Falcons, 23-13, good victory for them, and they move on in their fight for a very subpar NFC South. Next, we can look at the Arizona Cardinals and the Pittsburgh Steelers as these two teams meet for a Super Bowl 43 rematch. Now, the Steelers right now, really good home field advantage, currently sitting at 4-2 on the season, and a relatively healthy unit coming into this matchup here, all things considered how far we are into the season. Arizona, though, they're dealing with a fairly, not super long, but long enough injury report with Trey McBride, who's come on strong for them. Jalen Thompson's dealing with something right now. Marquise Brown and Michael Wilson, so you got a couple of wide receivers hurting as well. A lot of receiving threats that you have on your team all listed as questionable, and I think that does cause some concern for the Cardinals. Now, Pittsburgh, coming off their first 400-yard offensive performance in nearly 4 years. That's absurd that that's even a statistic here, but here we are coming off their first 400-yard performance in nearly 4 years, and you're going up against an Arizona Cardinals team right now that is 26th in yards per game allowed and 31st in points per game allowed this season. If you want to call last week a bounce back, or a long-awaited bounce back, I guess you could say, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, this game could be a great way to build upon that. Obviously, the firing of Matt Canada has spun up some hope over there offensively for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we got one of their best performances in years now, so there is that to be excited about, coupled with the fact that I do think this Steelers defense could create some opportunities to really get this offense moving this week against the Cardinals. Pittsburgh defense loves to force turnovers. They got 20 on the season right now, one of the best units in the NFL. If Arizona's not protecting the football, I don't really see how they win this game. And I've been kind of hammering this point for a while now. For as competitive as Arizona was early in the season, and now I feel like they're starting to kind of fall off a little bit more, even despite the fact that Kyler Murray is back for them. It's a team that had a lot more problems than just the quarterback coming into this season, and it's clearly shown. Their record sitting at now, 2-10 at this point in the season, 0-6 on the road. I don't really know how you're going to pick the Arizona Cardinals in this game. I like the Steelers. I have them winning 20-17. Another Steelers-like contest. I don't expect their offense to light the world on fire despite how much of a lesser opponent they're facing in Arizona, but I do expect that the Steelers get the job done. I think we might see another 400 or so yard performance. You're going up against an Arizona Cardinals defense that's allowing 140 yards per game on the ground, so their Thunder and Lightning duo at running back could potentially have a very strong performance there. So give me the Steelers, 2017. Good contest, good win for them. I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe the Cardinals find their way into the end zone once or twice. Kyler Murray can be a problem at times, especially for overly aggressive defenses, and I would say that the Steelers are a very aggressive unit, but I do think the Steelers get the win. Now we're looking at Miami taking on Washington here, and what I would argue is somewhat of a trap game for the Miami Dolphins here, as the Commanders kind of down and out. Only 1-4 at home this season, though. They're 4-8 on the year, 3 of their wins coming on the road with only a singular at home. Not been a great season for the Commanders, despite what was a very interesting early portion of the year, I would say, for them, where they were hotly competitive in some of their games here. But you have the number 2 scoring offense going up against the league's worst defense in points allowed. This is a matchup nightmare for the Washington Commanders, because if they cannot keep up, there is no shot that they win this game here, especially when you consider that since the return of Jalen Ramsey from his injury, He has 3 interceptions, and this defense has come alive in the 4 weeks that he's been playing with them. They have allowed only 16 points per game since Jalen Ramsey has found himself in the fold for this defense. And when you're looking at Washington offensively, they boast 22 turnovers this season, which is good for third most. A whopping, and I can't even believe this is a real number, 69 sacks. That is the most in the NFL by 14. That is 14 sacks more than the New York Giants, who sit at number 2, which puts them at, 55? So I have no idea how that's a real number. I have no idea how on earth anyone's confidently going into this game picking Washington. It would take a very serious Miami Dolphins collapse for them to lose this game. However, I will say the loss of Jalen Phillips will be something that we have to keep an eye on, because we'll see how that affects the pass rush of that team and being able to maybe bring some pressure against one of the worst pass protecting offensive lines in the NFL. But I don't really know how you don't take Miami in this game here. They should win pretty comfortably. Maybe the Commanders find their way into one of those games where they do score a lot of points. It has happened, although as of late, the offense has not looked nearly as good as it was at certain points earlier in the season. I'll take Miami, 34-20. Injury list is a little bit concerning for how long it is with the Dolphins. That is definitely something worth keeping an eye on as well as this game gets closer, but the Dolphins should be coming away with a win here. And next, this is probably one of the hardest games to pick for me personally this season. We have a red-hot Denver Broncos team heading into Houston to take on a Texans team that has run into a little bit of a snafu, I guess you could say, the last couple of weeks here with 1 turnovers or just dropping their game last week. Now, here's the deal. This is one of those matchups that when you look at it, you go back to week 6 and you can kind of see a change and shift in both of these teams here. First thing that I think that's worth pointing out, the efficiency of Denver's defense and the efficiency of Houston's offense. Fun matchup between the two. Denver has allowed only 16.5 points per game since week 6. Vastly different from that 70-point burger they had dropped on them earlier in the season. Houston themselves, they're averaging about 24 points per game, hence a big streak of wins that they were able to throw together, a strong performance the last, I would say, 5 or 6 weeks or so. So obviously, 2 teams who have been trending in the right direction as of the last month and a half or so. Now, there's a couple of matchups here, actually 3 of them that I'm really looking at that I think kind of determine how this game shakes out, but there is a lot of fun things to look at going into this game here. The first thing will be Houston's pass protection against Denver's pass rush. Houston has allowed 15 sacks in the last 6 weeks of play compared to Denver's 11 sacks in that same span that they've been able to notch defensively. That is something that is a little bit of a concern here because there was a stretch where Houston went 3 games without letting up a single sack. First couple of weeks was not great, and then from there they kind of sorted themselves out and found themselves in a good spot. But now Houston, depending on the week, they're either allowing 2-3 sacks, maybe a game where they'll have 1 sprinkled in there, but offensive line has been a little bit leaky as of late. Despite that, though, C.J. Stroud has still been nails for the most part. Denver, though, like I said, their pass rush, despite kind of selling off and restructuring what they were doing up front there, has gotten better. So there is that to look at. The second thing I'll be watching, and I think this is probably one of the better QB matchups we're going to have this season, just statistically speaking here, C.J. Stroud this year sitting at nearly 3,300 yards. He has 19 touchdowns to 5 interceptions with 3 rushing touchdowns. Russell Wilson, not as many passing yards. He only has 2,200. But 20 touchdowns, 4 interceptions with a rushing touchdown to boot as well. You have 2 quarterbacks that are playing at extremely high levels right now. A seasoned veteran in Russell Wilson, who's kind of on a bounce-back campaign right now. And you have C.J. Stroud, the young, hungry rookie who is basically dragging the Houston Texans right now, kicking and screaming towards a potential playoff berth here. So we have some really interesting stuff to look at as far as offenses go and as far as the Houston Texans pass pro and Denver's pass rush is concerned. But one more thing that I think is kind of key to what determines how this game shakes out is going to be how Houston's run defense fares against Denver's rushing attack, because this has been the bread and butter and the big reason as to why I think Denver has been so successful the last month and a half or so. Houston's run defense is allowing only about 95 yards per game in the NFL right now, which is good for 8th in the NFL. So that's really good. They've only allowed 1 singular 100-yard plus performance on the ground since week 5. When you look at Denver, on the flip side, same thing since week 5, or throughout the season right now, 115 yards per game, but since week 5 have only had 1 game under that 115-yard rushing mark. Their running attack has opened things up for the play action for Russell Wilson to do what he does best. When Wilson has a good running game behind him, things open up, he makes excellent decisions, and it becomes kind of a nightmare for defenses to deal with. And it's very clear that now that they've established a true running game over there in Denver, this offense is looking nearly as good as it should have been a year and a half ago. Now, as for picking who wins this game here, like I said, there's a multitude of things that you can kind of look at and point out that I think one of these things might factor into why one team loses or one team wins or whatever it may be. I do think it's worth mentioning, though, that despite Denver's 5-game winning streak, for as good as it's been, 4 of those games have been at home with only one singular road victory in that 5-game streak. That is somewhat concerning for me, considering the game is in Houston. But I have been picking against Denver for quite a bit now, and I honestly think I've gotten just about every single game wrong. I think in the last 5 weeks, I may have picked Denver like once to win, and that might be an overestimation. I might not have picked them at all. But they are on a 5-game heater right now. I've seen a couple of things from Houston the last couple of weeks that I'm not necessarily thrilled about, so I am leaning towards Denver in this one here. I think a tight matchup. I would not be shocked if the Texans come out and win this one, especially being at home. They are good at their house, but I'm going to take the Broncos. They're on a heater right now, and the way the defense has been playing and just how clean and turnover-free the Broncos are right now, they're playing smart, sound football on offense, and they're protecting the ball really well. Tough team to beat when your defense is playing just as well. I'll take the Broncos 23-21. Now, moving into the late window here, we have the Carolina Panthers being hosted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, this is a matchup of two teams in very ugly places right now. I know Carolina is currently sitting at 1-10, the de facto worst team in the NFL right now, but Tampa Bay is not doing much better themselves. They're currently 1-6 in their last 7, so there really isn't too much to hold on to as far as like, yeah, it's in Tampa Bay, they should be the favorites. Well, for what it's worth, it doesn't really matter where they've been playing the last month and a half. They're still dropping games regardless. Now, Carolina is working off of the fact that they let go of Frank Reich after only 11 games in his head coaching tenure there in Carolina. So could this be the jolt of lightning that the Carolina Panthers need to kind of get their offense to life and breathing? Probably not, but it is a possibility, and it's something that is worth mentioning. Carolina's offense has obviously been very bad this season, 30th in passing, 28th in rushing. They are 29th in points per game scored, sitting under 16 points per. They're also allowing nearly 4 sacks a game. There is not really anything that points to a Carolina victory in this game here, other than the fact that Tampa Bay has been pretty bad themselves at times, throwing games away or just having a real hard time connecting on plays, especially in the pass. For what it's worth, Carolina could find some success in this game. I don't know what the play calling is going to look like this week, how much it's going to change. Obviously, it's still the same offense in Carolina, but the play calling could be a lot different there. So we'll see what kind of how the philosophy of the offense shifts during this matchup here for them in week 1 without Frank Reich. But for whatever reason, despite Carolina's struggles and just where they are right now in the season, something smells upset in the water for me. And I'm really looking at the Panthers for a win here. And I can't believe I'm going to take them for the win, but something tells me that the Panthers get it done. Tampa Bay has just not looked good since their initial start to the season. And right now, similar to what the Raiders had happen to them a few weeks ago, coaching change, maybe a little bit more confidence and excitement in the room for the Carolina Panthers, and I think that they can take it to a division rival who has been struggling themselves, and these games, especially in the NFC South, usually always end up being a little bit closer. Give me the Panthers for a big upset. I'll take them 20-17. This is one of those that I'd probably end up being wrong on, but gut feeling, Panthers get the job done, so I'm going to go with them. Now we're going to look at the Cleveland Browns and the Los Angeles Rams, and it looks like we're going to be seeing P.J. Walker at quarterback with Dorian Thompson-Robinson dealing with concussion issues. So P.J. Walker going to get the start, at least as I expect it to be. That could always change between now and then, but for what it looks like, I think we're going to be seeing P.J. Walker. Now, if Cleveland wants to win this game, and there is definitely a possibility for them to do so, that defense is still great, and if they can play an excellent game, Cleveland's always going to be in it. That's what I've learned about them this season. If they pound the rock and just kind of keep the football out of harm's way, They have one of the better rushing attacks in the NFL right now, third most yards per game at 139, and Los Angeles Rams run defense allows about 113 yards per game. They're like middle of the pack or so, even close, a little bit closer to the bottom than they are the top. There is definitely an opportunity for them to find some success with Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt. Now, for the Rams, if they want to come out victorious in this game, they've got to find a way to slow down Myles Garrett and that Cleveland pass rush. And I think the best way you can do that is kind of the same thing. Run the football. Kyren Williams is back, and they looked unbelievable offensively last week with Kyren Williams in the fold. It's a completely different offense. He is a supreme talent for that team, and he clearly fits their scheme very, very well. So if the Rams can focus on maybe running the football a little bit more, Cleveland's run defense, they're a top 12 unit sitting at 105 yards per game. The Rams, with Williams under the fold, he had 143 yards and 8.9 yards per carry last week. They have a good shot at winning. The offensive line over there in LA has actually been surprisingly solid this year. They're allowing only 2 sacks per game. Cleveland's pass rush is sitting at about 3 sacks per game themselves, but I'm not going to really try to match up my O-line against Cleveland's pass rush. I think a lot of offenses have tried that, especially earlier in the season, and have learned the hard way. So at this point in the year, it's how can you limit the pass rush from being as effective as they want to be? Well, if you're not passing the football, they can't pressure your quarterback, they can't sack them, they can't take them down, they can't get hits on them. That's probably the best way to do it, is just try to focus on running the football a little bit more, open things up in the play action, help out your wide receivers a little bit. But I think if the Rams can protect the ball, run the ball, I think they have a shot of winning this game, and I'm going to take the Rams here. The offense last week for Cleveland was scary to watch and kind of feels like it might throw away the rest of the season for them. Hopefully I'm wrong, but I don't really know what to expect out of this Cleveland offense going forward. I don't really know how you pick them until we get a few more games of their offense put together and really get a good idea as to what they're going to look like minus Deshaun Watson the rest of the season. So I'll take the Rams 20-10. Good victory for them at home. I like it. Now, this game here, game of the week, potentially game of the season. We have Philadelphia 5-0 at home, 10-1 on the season, hosting the San Francisco 49ers, currently sitting at 8-3, and they're 4-2 on the road themselves. The 5-0 home game winning streak, Philadelphia puts on the line. This is an NFC Championship rematch. There's a ton of bad blood. The blood is boiling at this point. This has got to be one of the best games of the season. It just has to be. There's no way it's a blowout on one side or the other. It is going to come down to the wire, and I firmly believe that. When you look at these two teams and the way they match up, it is eerily similar the way they look. When you look at the numbers, as far as points per game scored this season, 28.2 for the 49ers, 28.2 for the Philadelphia Eagles. Spot on down to the decimal. As far as passing yards per game goes, a little bit of separation between the two. Philadelphia really likes to run the football. There's 250 yards per game for the 49ers to 231 for the Eagles. So about a 19-yard difference there. You look at rushing yards per game. Both these teams love to run the football. 136 yards per game for the 49ers, 133 yards per game for the Eagles. When you look at their run defenses, 82 yards per game allowed for the 49ers, which is second, 85 in the yards per game for the Philadelphia Eagles. A lot of F's here with what I'm saying here. Not F's because Philadelphia's PH, but a lot of thing going around here. 85 yards per game for the Philadelphia Eagles, good for third in the NFL. These teams match up extremely well, and they kind of get it done in very similar facets as well. One difference, though, that I think is really worth mentioning here is the turnover situation. When you look at Philadelphia, they're more of a middle-of-the-pack team when it comes to turnovers. They have currently 16 offensive turnovers on the season to 14 defensive takeaways this season. Whereas when you look at San Francisco, they're a top 3 unit in both turnovers on offense and takeaways forced. 10 offensive turnovers on the season, so you're averaging less than 1 turnover a game right now, and they have 21 defensive takeaways this season, which at that, you're looking at nearly 2 turnovers forced a game. On top of that, Philadelphia is coming off of a very aggressive and hard-fought matchup with the Buffalo Bills that went into overtime last week. And their injury list coming out of that game is pretty long. You have A.J. Brown, Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis, Lane Johnson, DeAndre Swift, Devontae Smith, Justin Evans, and Zach Cunningham, all dealing with injury issues listed as non-participants or limited participants in practice yesterday. Now, that's a very long list. Obviously, I don't expect every single one of those guys to miss the game. Honestly, 2/3 of that list probably ends up playing, but you're going to be missing some of those guys in that matchup here. And a guy like Fletcher Cox might be someone you're missing. Jordan Davis could be one as well. I'm a little bit concerned about just the state of health for the Eagles going into this game here, coming off the heels of a very physical and demanding contest against the Buffalo Bills. So with that being said, I think I'm going to go 49ers in this matchup here. I have a higher scoring contest. I think this one's going to be fun. 31-28 San Francisco, but just the amount of injuries and also the turnover situation kind of scares me a little bit regarding Philadelphia. So I think I'm going to take the safer of the two and go with San Francisco. Now, Philadelphia, for what it's worth, all season long has been finding ways to win. Their lone loss to some wild loss to the New York Jets earlier in the season. There is that, but health concerns and just, again, that turnover stuff kind of scares me away from Philadelphia at this point. If they were healthier going into this matchup here, I'd feel a lot more confident. And like I said, all of these guys could even end up playing, but they're on the injury list for a reason. And even if they're playing in the game, how many of these guys are actually at 100%? And who's playing with something still nagging them, but, they're maybe just taking something to help relieve the pain and try to forget about it as long as they can until it starts to catch up with them in that third and fourth quarter. And that is where the concern lies for me in Philadelphia. So give me the 49ers 31-28 in a very exciting contest here. Looking at Sunday Night Football, this is one of those matchups that I feel like you say it out loud and you think Chiefs right away, but then when you really start to dive into the numbers and just kind of the state of these two teams, it gets a little bit muddier and a little bit more complicated than just that. As Kansas City goes into Green Bay, the question really needs to be asked about the Packers. Are they for real? They're coming off of a huge win over Detroit, and Green Bay basically gets a second chance right after beating the Lions that beat the Chiefs earlier this year and doubled down with a win over a Kansas City Chiefs team that I think a lot of people are probably doubting them against. But when you look at the recent games, and I would say like the last 4 for the Green Bay Packers, Jordan Love is averaging 391 yards per game. They're the offenses, that is. Jordan Love has been nails, though. Excellent job by him, but they're facing a Kansas City pass defense that's allowing only 176 yards per game, 4th fewest in the NFL. The Chiefs' defense, especially against the pass, has been a godsend for them in some of their matchups. Drops and tipped passes for Kansas City is also something we're currently following, depending on what website you look at. Some places have the number listed higher than others. I've seen the number as low as like 23. I've seen it as high as 28. It just kind of depends on the website you're looking at and how they track drops and what they consider and do not consider drops. But they lead the NFL in it, and that is a general consensus amongst everybody. When you're going up against a defense in Green Bay that has kind of been carrying the team here, you do want to be careful because those tips, those drops can lead to turnovers. And you do have a group that is not afraid to go after the football, not afraid to go after the quarterback here. And I think that when you try to pick a winner and decide who comes out victorious in this contest, I think you really need to look at the running game of both of these teams and who can take advantage of the opponent's run defense best. Because both these teams, they're not known for running the football. The Chiefs are averaging about 106 yards, 60 would be a lot more. 106 yards per game, 17th in the NFL on the ground. Green Bay sitting at 102, they're at 21st. So neither team really known for running the ball, but their run defenses are also fairly weak, especially on Green Bay's side. Green Bay averages about 135 yards per game allowed on the ground to Kansas City's 113. They're both in like the bottom third of the NFL, so not great on either side, but a little bit more glaring for Green Bay. I think whoever runs the ball more effectively in this game is probably the team that comes out victorious because both pass defenses are top 10 units. The Chiefs are top 5, but Green Bay's still a top 10. So whoever can run the ball, and for me personally, you look at the state of the running back room right now in Green Bay, injuries concerns, obviously a thing to look at here. Isaiah Pacheco runs harder than absolutely anybody in the NFL right now. If you are on social media anywhere, you see the memes of people running through walls or just very angry looking people running as fast as they can. That is Isaiah Pacheco +1 with his hair on fire. He is a madman with the football when it's in his hands. So if San Francisco wants to win and keep a ball out of Jordan Love's hot hand right now, run it effectively, chew the clock, Try to mitigate the amount of times you can get a tipped pass or a dropped pass from your wide receiver core and go with Kansas City and the W 21-17. I think it should be a close matchup here. I think Green Bay has definitely figured something out at this point in the season, but The Chiefs, in my opinion, are a slightly better team. And if I'm going to be picking between which team I think is going to run the football more effectively, I really believe in Isaiah Pacheco. Great running back, runs angrier than anyone. I'll take the Chiefs 21-17. And then to wrap up the week's picks here, Monday Night Football is going to be a bit of a dud, I would assume. Unfortunately, that just kind of seems to be primetime games. Thursdays and Monday football games have just not been great this year, and that's just really unfortunate because it is a primetime matchup. It's the only game that's on. And what should have been a fun game with Joe Burrow and his Bengals, now with no Joe Burrow and Jake Browning, I don't really know what you're going to get out of this Cincinnati Bengals offense. Conventional wisdom will tell you that this is a game the Jaguars should be winning, and should be winning pretty handedly at that when you consider where the Bengals are at this point in the season. However, Jacksonville is only 3-3 at home, so there is something to hang on for the Bengals. But when you look at what Jacksonville does defensively, again, you're going up against the backup quarterback, so that kind of works in your favor. But Jacksonville has let teams move through the air, but they do not let teams run the football. They are a top 5 run defense in the NFL right now. And if Jacksonville can force Cincinnati into a one-dimensional situation where they know that Cincinnati is throwing the football, I think you can take advantage of Jake Browning and make this game a little bit ugly. So, good opportunity for the Jaguars to beat up on an opponent that's in a really tough spot right now. I think they should win, and honestly, anything less than like a 2-possession victory is kind of unacceptable for a team that's supposed to be heading to the playoffs, considering their record and where they're at this season. So give me the Jaguars. I think they win fairly comfortably, 30-10, not a very close contest. One of those games you probably want to watch on condensed replay the next day if you have NFL Plus, or just maybe catch that like 10 to 13 minute highlight reel they throw on the NFL's YouTube page. You can always check those out when the game's over, but probably not a game that you want to tune in unless you have to, like I do. But that is it for me. Those are my picks for week number 13 in the NFL. Let me know your picks, your thoughts on my picks. Let me hear the bets you're going for this weekend. I would love to discuss with you all in that comment section down below, but that is it for me. I greatly appreciate you for hanging out. I will see you all next time. Have a good one.